for joining me once again. In this tutorial, we'll be learning how to create an Ubuntu instance on AWS. And all we need to do is just log into our AWS console. And firstly, we should check to make sure that we are on the correct zone where we want to create the instance. You can create it in different zones. For us, we're on North Virginia, and that's where we're gonna launch our instance in. And there's different options how to launch it. Just go to your instance, click on the orange launch instance button, and here we're going to search for Ubuntu. There we go, and we'll see all the list of Ubuntu operating systems. We select the free tier because we want the free tier version, and click on select, and here we can choose the instance type. The free tier eligible one is T2 micro with 1 CPU and 1 gig of memory. And here we look at our configuration details. There isn't much to change here. This is just a simple setup. We could do an IAM role if we wanted to, but not necessary for this tutorial. And here we're going to max it out to 30 gig, which is the maximum allowed size for free tier instances. And usually I like to add a name for my instances. So here I'm adding a name for it, and it's CP tutorials. And we configure the security group here. We don't have any setup, but since this is a simple setup, we can just create one here, and we just give it a name, and then we configure the rule. For now, we'll just do the SSH. Later on, we'll configure the HTTP and HTTPS, as well as the MySQL and all the databases ports that we need. For the SSH, you can leave it on public, or you can choose your IP address, which is what I've chosen here. And you review your details before you click on launch. And yeah, we'll click on launch, and this is very important. Here you need to download your Keypair. This gives you access to this instance from SSH terminal, or even on FileZilla, or whatever you choose to connect to it with. So we give it a name, and then we're going to download this Keypair, and you must try and keep this safe because anyone with access to this Keypair can actually access your server. And once that is done, we can click on launch instance, and launch an instance. You can see the instance is now launched, and then we go to the dashboard. We should be able to see the instance, but it's on pending right now. It takes a few seconds to get up and running. If we refresh it, which we should do, if we refresh it now, we should be able to see it running. There you go. So the instance is active, but we need to now assign an elastic IP to it, so that we don't use the dynamic IP, which changes every time we restart the server. So we should allocate an IP to this instance so that it can stay constant. So we can check for a IP address by searching for it on the services panel. That's one way to go. We can also find it on the left hand side toolbar. On the left hand side bar down there, you can see the elastic IP, or we can just search for it. Either way, whichever option you choose, you can easily find anything you're looking for if you just search for it. I prefer to search for it, and you just search for elastic IP, and you click on it, and it should bring you to this elastic IP control panel. And once we allocate it, there you go, you click on allocate IP addresses, and here there isn't much to configure. Just choose from the Amazon pool, and if you want, you can give it a name tag as well, which is usually what I do. I'll give it a name and just call it the name of my instance, and then put IP at the end, so that I'll know which is which, because over time, if you keep creating instances, you might get confused as to which IP is for which. So it's good practice to give it a name, and then you click on allocate. And once it's allocated, now you have to attach this IP to the instance we've already created. So that's what we should do. And you click on actions and you go down to associate IP address, and you choose instance in this case, and then select the instance, and then you also select the private IP for this instance, and this will make sure that the IP address is tied to this instance. And then we click on associate. And once that is done, we can now verify that the instance is not connected to this particular Elastic IP. So if we go back to our EC2 dashboard and go into instances, and then we can click on the instance, and then we can see the new IP address which we have just created is now associated with this instance. And if we go back to the Elastic IP dashboard, if we go back, which is somewhere here, we can just search for it. If we go back to the Elastic IP dashboard, there we go. We can verify that the IP address and the one in the instance is the same, which tells us that we've successfully attached this IP address to this instance. So that's pretty much it. From there on, we can use it to connect on SSH into this server. Thank you. Peace.